Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Girl Aisha Mubenga. You are listening to the Seeking Covering podcast where your stories matter. I'm truly grateful that you guys are here today because this is one of those conversations that requires sincerity from all of us, including myself, of course. This episode began with a discussion I had with my baby sister, who is 14 years old, about something many of us have quietly observed, the increasing harshness with which Muslims correct one another, particularly in public spaces and especially online. We were speaking especially about Muslim women who are navigating their faith visibly through their hijab, modesty, public reminders online, or simply sharing aspects of their lives and how often their efforts are met not with encouragement but with harsh correction. It led me back to a narration that many of us memorized as children, but perhaps not revisited with adult reflection. The story of the Bedouin, man who urinated in the masjid, and the way the Prophet Muhammad responded to the situation. When you approach this narration carefully, you realize that it is not merely a lesson on etiquette, it is a master class in leadership, discernment, emotional intelligence, and most importantly, in mercy. So let us imagine the setting of the story, right? The masjid in Madinah. So during the time of the Prophet Muhammad wasallam, the masjids were simple, and this masjid in particular was simple in structure but immense in sanctity. It was built on palm trunks and had sandy floors. No fancy, expensive, soft carpets like how our masjids have now. It was simple, right? There was no fancy chandeliers. It was just simple. Yet, it was the heart of the community at that time. It was a place where revelation descended and where the companions gathered there to learn directly from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And it was a space filled with reverence. So during one of the gatherings that the Sahabas usually have with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, a Bedouin enters the masjid. He was not from Medina, of course. He was unfamiliar with the norms and the rulings that had become well established among the companions. So, without understanding the gravity of his action, he went to a corner of the masjid and began to urinate himself. The companions reacted immediately. Their anger was understandable, honestly. We would have, gotten upset as well if we saw some random guy just showing up in the masjid premises and helping himself, basically. So the companions were, they were angered, they were irritated. Because this space was a space that was sacred. It was a masjid, and what he was doing was inappropriate. But in this crucial moments, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ then instructs them to leave the man alone and allow him to finish urinating. SubhanAllah, that decision alone deserves reflection. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not ignore the wrong that was being done, of course. He did not dismiss the sanctity of the masjid. Instead, what he did was that he assessed the situation with wisdom. He obviously felt that stopping the man abruptly would have spread the impurity further, and publicly humiliating him would have hardened his heart and basically embarrassed him. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ chose to restrain himself and the Sahabas as well. So after he finishes urinating, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gently explained that, the masjid was not a place for such acts. It was a place for prayer, a place for remembrance, and a place where the recitation of the Quran was happening. The companions were instructed as well to pour water over the affected area, and the matter was resolved with this Bedouin man's dignity intact. So this narration is recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari, and it concludes with the man, the Bedouin, expressing heartfelt gratitude, so moved by the mercy that he was shown that he made dua for himself and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ alone, even in correcting that limited understanding of this Bedouin for making dua just for himself and the Prophet. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ still corrected him gently. This interaction reveals something essential. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ prioritized the preservation of the man's heart over the satisfaction of reaction in anger. There is another hadith that complements this beautifully, where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says that gentleness is not placed in something except that it is beautified, and that it is not removed from something except that it makes it deficient. This narration is recorded in Sahih Muslim. We need to understand that gentleness beautifies, correction and harshness disfigures it. And honestly, this is where most of us must turn inwardly. Today, our public spaces are no longer limited to physical gatherings. Social media has become a kind of open courtyard where Muslims express their struggles, growth, and reflections. Yet instead of sand and palm trees, we have comment sections and we have screenshots, right? Consider how often someone shares their attempt at growth and is immediately met with public rebuke. A sister adjusting to hijab may still be learning, a revert may not yet know all the rulings, a young Muslim may speak about struggling with consistency in prayer. The correction may technically be accurate, but accuracy alone does not make it prophetic. Accuracy alone does not make it something that the Prophet would have done, or does not even make it the correct way to go about giving that advice. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ distinguished between ignorance and arrogance. The Bedouin was not rebelling, right? The Bedouin who urinated at the masjid, he was not rebelling. He simply did not know, right? His mistake required education and not humiliation. We assume that visible imperfection reflects defiance. We assume that gradual growth signals carelessness. But honestly, faith matters over time. Even the companions underwent transformation gradually. The prohibition of certain practices came in stages. Hearts were cultivated before rulings were enforced. So why then do we demand instantaneous refinement from one another? There's another prophetic teaching that deepens this conversation. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "Whoever conceals the faults of a Muslim, Allah will conceal his faults in this world and in the hereafter." This narration is also found in Sahih Muslim. I want you to pause here and consider the weight of that promise. We survive daily because Allah conceals us. Our private shortcomings are not broadcast. Our mistakes are not written across our foreheads. If they were, our relationships would collapse under the strain of exposure. and yet we sometimes participate in the exposure of others in the name of religious concern. Honestly, there is a difference between sincere counsel and public shaming. Sincere counsel seeks reform while protecting dignity. Public shaming often seeks validation while disguising itself as concern. Before correcting someone, my beloved sisters or brothers, we must ask ourselves uncomfortable but necessary questions. Is this truly for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or is there a desire to be seen as knowledgeable? Would I say this in the same tone if no one else were watching? Have I prayed for this person as much as I am critiquing them? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ corrected wrong actions consistently, but his method were marked by discernment. He understood time, he understood personality, he understood that humiliation can close doors that knowledge alone cannot reopen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes himself as gentle and explicitly states that had he been harsh or hard-hearted, people would have dispersed from around him. That statement alone should humble us. If harshness could have driven away the best generation from the best of creation, what might it do when it comes from us? For those who feel constantly scrutinized, especially women navigating visible aspects of their faith, remember that your journey with Allah is not invisible because it is gradual. Sincerity is not measured by how perfectly you appear to others. Growth often unfolds quietly and imperfectly. So continue striving. And for those who feel compelled to correct frequently, let us remember that gentleness does not dilute truth. It enhances it. Private advice, sincere dua, and thoughtful timing often accomplishes more than public confrontations. The man who entered the masjid left transformed, not because he was shamed, but because he was shown mercy. That is the legacy we are meant to carry forward as we move through our communities, whether in physical masajids or digital spaces. May we strive to embody the prophetic balance of truth and tenderness. May we remember that we too are recipients of divine concealment, and may we extend to others the patience and the mercy that we desperately rely upon ourselves. May Allah purify our intentions, soften our hearts, and allow our words to be means of guidance rather than harm. Shukran for tuning in. Shukran for listening in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.